You are standing outside right now. The temperature is -50, not -50 Celsius, -50 Fahrenheit. Your eyelashes freeze shut in under a minute. The moisture in your nostrils turns to ice with every breath. Your phone is dead. It stopped working 20 minutes ago because the battery cannot function at this temperature. The clothing you are wearing, every layer of it, will not save you. You have roughly 2 hours before your organs begin to shut down. Maybe less. Now imagine you have no clothing at all. No fabric. No synthetic insulation. No zipper. Nothing manufactured. You have animal skins, your own 2 hands, and whatever you can pull from the frozen earth beneath your feet. This is not a hypothetical. This is Tuesday. For 100,000 years. The Ice Age was not a single event. It was a series of glacial periods stretching across hundreds of thousands of years, where temperatures in parts of Europe and Asia dropped so low that the ground froze permanently to a depth of 300 feet. Rivers became solid highways. Forests vanished under miles of ice. And the humans who lived through it did not merely survive. They engineered solutions so advanced that when modern scientists reconstructed them, they could not improve on the designs. Let's start with how they stayed warm, because this is where every assumption falls apart. The human body loses heat in 4 ways. Conduction, through direct contact with cold surfaces. Convection, through moving air carrying heat away from the skin. Radiation, heat escaping from the body into the surrounding environment. And evaporation, moisture on the skin pulling heat as it dries. Modern survival gear is designed to address all 4. Your ancestors addressed all 4 30,000 years ago, with dead animals. The clothing system they developed was not a fur draped over the shoulders. It was a precision-engineered, multi-layered thermal system that modern Arctic researchers have called the most sophisticated cold-weather clothing ever designed by pre-industrial humans. The base layer sat directly against the skin. It was made from caribou hide, chosen specifically because caribou fur is hollow. Each individual hair is a tiny air-filled tube, trapping warm air at the microscopic level. No modern synthetic fiber has successfully replicated the thermal efficiency of hollow caribou hair. The fur faced inward against the body, creating a warm air pocket between skin and hide. The outer layer was a second caribou hide, but this time with the fur facing outward. The purpose was not warmth. The purpose was wind resistance. Outward-facing fur deflects moving air, preventing convection from stripping heat away from the inner layer. 2 layers, 2 directions, 2 different thermal functions. 1 animal. At the seams, they used sinew thread and bone needles so fine that archaeologists initially mistook them for decorative objects. The needles found at sites in Russia dating back 40,000 years are thinner than modern sewing needles. The stitching was waterproof. It had to be. A single wet seam at -50 could kill you by morning. But clothing alone does not explain how they survived the worst nights. The nights when the temperature dropped below -70 and the wind came screaming across the open steppe with nothing to stop it for 1,000 miles. For that, they built. The pit house was one of the earliest engineered shelters in human history. Dug into the earth to a depth of 4 to 6 feet, the pit house exploited a simple principle that modern humans forget. Underground temperature is stable. At 6 feet below the surface, the ground maintains a constant temperature roughly 30 degrees warmer than the air above, regardless of how cold it gets. The Ice Age builders did not discover this by accident. They tested it. Archaeological evidence at multiple sites shows experimental pits of varying depths, abandoned after trial, until the optimal depth was found. Over the pit, they constructed a frame. Mammoth tusks, curved and interlocked, formed the skeleton. Smaller bones filled the gaps. Over that, layers of hide, sealed with animal fat, created a windproof and waterproof shell. The result was a dome-shaped structure, half underground and half above, that could maintain an interior temperature 50 degrees warmer than the outside air using nothing but body heat and a small fire. 50 degrees. With no electricity, no gas, no insulation foam, just bone, hide, and an understanding of thermal physics that would not be formally described by science for another 25,000 years. The fire management inside these shelters was equally extraordinary. They did not simply light a fire and hope for the best. They designed hearth systems. A central fire pit provided primary heat. Surrounding it, Smaller satellite fires were positioned to create thermal zones. Work areas near one fire. Sleeping areas near another. Infant care in the warmest spot. The smoke was managed through a ventilation hole at the apex of the dome, sized precisely to draw smoke upward without pulling too much warm air out. If the ventilation was too large, heat escaped. If it was too small, smoke filled the shelter and everyone inside would suffocate. They calibrated it. By hand. In the dark. At -50. And then there was the food problem. Because surviving the cold means nothing if you starve. The Ice Age diet was built on one principle that modern nutritionists would find shocking. Fat. Enormous quantities of fat. A single Ice Age adult consumed an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 calories per day, with 60 to 80% of those calories coming from animal fat. Not protein. Fat. Because at extreme cold temperatures, the human body burns fat for heat the way a furnace burns fuel. Protein alone cannot sustain that burn rate. Carbohydrates were scarce. Fat was survival. They ate bone marrow by the pound, cracking open long bones and scooping out the dense, calorie-rich marrow inside. They ate organ meat raw, the liver and kidneys packed with vitamins that prevented the diseases of extreme cold. They ate blubber when they could get it. They dried and stored meat in underground caches that functioned as natural freezers, keeping food preserved for months. And they did something else with food that scientists did not expect to find. They fermented it. Archaeological evidence from multiple Ice Age sites shows that meat and fish were deliberately allowed to partially decompose under controlled conditions before being consumed. This was not desperation. Fermentation breaks down proteins into amino acids that are easier to absorb and produces beneficial bacteria that support gut health in extreme environments. Modern Arctic peoples still practice this technique. Your ancestors invented it. But the most extraordinary survival method was not physical. It was social. No human survived the Ice Age alone. The fundamental unit of survival was the band, a group of 25 to 50 individuals bound together by kinship, obligation, and absolute mutual dependence. Every member had a role. Every role was critical. A single missing skill set, a lost firekeeper, a dead hide worker, an injured hunter, could cascade into the death of the entire group within weeks. They shared everything. Not out of generosity. Out of mathematics. A hunter who killed a mammoth could not eat it all before it froze or rotted. Sharing distributed calories across the group, ensuring that everyone had enough to survive the next hunt. Hoarding was not just selfish. Hoarding was suicidal. Because the mammoth you refuse to share today might be the only food your neighbor has when he is the one who saves your child tomorrow. This is not a metaphor. This is how they calculated survival. In real time. Every day. For 100,000 years. The Ice Age ended roughly 11,700 years ago. The glaciers retreated. The temperatures rose. The megafauna died. And humans walked out of the cold into a warming world carrying every lesson the ice had taught them. How to build, how to insulate, how to manage fire, food, community, and risk. Every house you have ever lived in is a descendant of those mammoth bone domes. Every winter coat you own is a simplified version of that caribou hide system. Every community that has ever fed its weakest members is practicing a survival strategy invented on a frozen steppe at -50 by people who had nothing but bone, hide, and each other. You set your thermostat to 72 and forget about it. They set theirs with mammoth tusks and never forgot anything. The difference between you and them is not intelligence. It is not capability. It is not strength. The difference is that they had to. And you never will.